Hello and welcome to CS Week Success Stories Second Tuesday webinar series. These webinars are the top-rated workshops from our attendees from Conference 40 held last April in Phoenix, Arizona. I'm Lisa Collins, Education Director with CS Week, and with me is Denise Mondor, who will be your host managing the webinar. We invite you to plan on attending CS Week in Conference 41 at the Fort Worth Convention Center in Fort Worth, Texas, next May, the 22nd through the 26th. This program will be recorded and available for playback along with our other archived presentations. You will find it under the Webinars tab from our website, csweek.org. Attendees are encouraged to upload questions in the Q&A panel on the lower right of your screen. Be sure to click the All tab to make sure that we all see the question and your question will not be not answered. We will wait until the end of the presentation to answer these questions. Today's program, Managing Organizational Change, Metrics That Matter, is presented by Peggy Blowers, Denise Hutchinson, and moderated by Sheila Gatlin. Welcome, ladies.
Thank you. Thank you, Lisa, and thank you, Denise, for having us today. This is Sheila Gatlin. Peggy and Denise and I are delighted to be here with you today to share with you the details from the presentation that they presented at the CS Week conference back in April of this year. We felt that the presentation was very well attended. We had lots of great engagement and certainly are looking forward to sharing the details with you all here today. Just by way of introductions, quickly, I'm an executive director within EY. I lead our organizational change management and training practice within EY for our power and utilities clients. I've spent the bulk of the last 18 years of my career working on the people side of technology change. So the topic of organizational change management and training are really very near and dear to my heart. As we all know, organizational change management can be perceived at times as the quote-unquote fluffy stuff, the soft side of change and technology change. And in particular, we know how challenging it can be to measure some of the softer side of some of this transformational change. So we wanted to take a few minutes to demystify organizational change and paint a picture of some of the key organizational change management activities that are conducted as part of some of these large technology transformation projects, how to measure those activities, and how to make adjustments as the projects go along. Joining me today are two very accomplished org change practitioners. We have Peggy Blowers and Denise Hutchinson. Peggy Blowers works for Avista Corp and has filled organizational change management leadership roles on their CIS project, their EAM and MDM projects. Peggy has a long history of leadership, both in organizational change as well as business operations for large organizations, and has led global technology deployments. Also with me today is Denise Hutchinson. Denise is the Manager of Organizational Change at Arizona Public Service. She has held positions within call center leadership as well as training and development leadership for Arizona Public Service over her long and esteemed career here. So both Peggy and Denise have great stories to tell of both their technology, the organizational change management initiatives for their technology transformations. So today we'll go through a little bit of an organizational change framework. Denise will present some of the details regarding the OCM program here at APS. Peggy will do the same for Avista. And we do, as Lisa mentioned earlier, have an opportunity for you all to pass questions along to us, so we'll take some Q&A at the end. We don't actually have evaluations today that I'm aware of. This is the deck that we use during the CS Week conference. So just to give a little bit of context around organizational change, because sometimes as we talk through what organizational change management is, it means different things to different people. So this is just a representation or a framework that we at EY use to kind of categorize the activities that are related to organizational change management. So And again, as we talked about earlier, sometimes it is difficult to measure these things or know how to measure these things, but we certainly want to focus on how can we measure things around culture, how can we manage stakeholder engagement, how can we measure, engage business readiness, training, performance support, and continuous improvement, certainly in each of these realms in terms of business engagement, business readiness, and business adoption. One of the things that I like to say when I talk about organizational change is that when organizational change management is done well, it is almost invisible to people. Organizational change management, when not done well or not done at all, is very evident to people and very painful to people. So we like to make sure that organizational change management activities are infused throughout an organizational change or a transformation project. And so what we'll go through here today is really how can you measure some of the activities and the results of the activities related to organizational change, and how can you make adjustments to them as you go along to make sure you're helping people transition through the change as effectively as possible. So with that, I will turn it over to Denise Hutchinson to share with you the details from the Organizational Change Management Program from Arizona Public Service. Denise?
Good afternoon or morning, everyone, depending on where you're at. Nice to have you with us today. We're going to cover what we are in the midst of doing here at APS, and I will tell you that since we did a presentation at CS Week, we've come a long way since then, and so I'll try to interject some things that we've added along the way in addition, just by way of verbiage. I won't spend any time on what APS is. You can look at this for yourselves later in terms of what our territory is like in the state of Arizona and our customer base. For engagement, we have done a lot of things related to getting the stakeholders involved. We've had the stakeholder involvement very, very significant here at APS, and that, of course, brings its really great points, and it also adds some challenges to our work, but we're working through all those things very effectively. We have a change champion network that we've set up, and we have been doing active road shows throughout the state, trying to keep people informed about what's happening with our project. We're implementing a CCNB and Mobile Workforce Management Oracle project here at APS. We're scheduled to go live in March of 2017, and the road shows have been really helping people understand what they can expect, also giving them some demos of the systems. We have a lot of communication that we've been doing that we'll talk about a little more, some pulse checks, and also gamification that we have deployed. From a communications perspective, we put out quarterly newsletters, that's articles about our project, to just keep people informed and provide a little more insight to them so that they kind of transparently learn all the details of what's going on in our project. We also have a monthly postcards that we're sending out to just leaders, and the purpose of those is so that the leaders have something to share with their people about the Synergy project. We know that employees like to hear things from their leaders, and so this is our way of helping them have something to share related to the large project that's happening here at APS. We also have ongoing communications that we do through our intranet site and other meetings that we hold ad hoc. Our pulse survey is just exactly what it sounds like. We're taking the pulse of our stakeholders to find out how they're feeling. We've talked about this from the beginning as measuring their confidence along the way. Of course, when we get ready to do training, we'll also be measuring their competence in terms of how well they're able to assimilate what we're teaching them. But this assessment is really to address any gaps that we may have related to communication, or when they're feeling concerned or anxious, we'll get that information through the pulse check, and we'll make a plan in terms of how to address that. We're using Qualtrics to capture that data. We import it into an analytics tool, and then we extract those results to determine where we may have some gaps that we need to address. Gamification, as you all probably know, gamification could be a variety of ways of infusing games into a communications process or into training. We are actually using a game application that we have partnered with Ringarang, a company that does this for a vendor that does this, and it's using gamified learning to help us track retention of program knowledge. We started out with a pilot that was very successful. We compared people that were in a test group to people that were in control group in terms of how well they were able to retain knowledge about our project. And because those results were successful, we have kicked off this week a program to take us up through the go-live time. And we'll be utilizing questions that the games put out questions related to the training. We'll have some pre-questions and post-questions, and then we'll be able to track and monitor how well people are understanding the information that they're getting. We have a readiness survey that we are moving into starting this month, and that is tagging along to the pulse check. And this readiness assessment is really focused on change impact planning. We'll also have some knowledge proficiency assessments that will happen within the training. Obviously, we'll have your typical training assessments, and we are using a knowledge-based. We have a knowledge-based system here at APS that we're migrating into a new format that we're using as part of the readiness for our business. We have embarked on a large-scale change impact action planning process because we have focused very hard on not changing the product, but changing the processes so that we don't have customizations that keep us from accepting upgrades. So as a result, we have a need to change a lot of the processes here at APS in terms of how they stand today. The way we've done that is we've worked with the business to we've identified the process changes needing along the way. We sort those by topic and prioritize them. Then we've clarified the details to the business, and the business is working through developing action plans that they need to implement in order to change the processes within the business. Some of those process plans will simply be rolled into the training. Others will be communicated ahead of time if there are changes that we can make to our processes before implementation. And of course, we're documenting those changes and integrating them into the system and into the business. We are tracking that. So one of the ways, another way we're measuring things and for change management here at APS is tracking those action plans. So as you can see, the data here that you see on the screen is ending very, very much in May. We've done a lot since then. We have a much more robust list now of change action plannings that are either in progress or already in the implementation phase. But we've been measuring along the way to see where we're at so that we are very, very clear if there's gaps that are open that need to be filled before we go live. The readiness assessment is another way that we're measuring readiness of the employees. You can see kind of a screen capture here of the change log that we're tracking in addition to individual readiness assessment. So we're really trying to understand the security and confidence that we have amongst our employees, which is another way that we're measuring the change management process. In addition, as I mentioned earlier, we have knowledge and proficiency assessments that happen within training. We'll have post-course practice. We'll be tracking attendance of that post-course practice. And since we actually implemented this presentation at the CS Week, we have done a lot more extensive planning around the proficiency, and we have made it a very much more structured process where we will have proctored sessions. Employees will be coming into those proctored labs to do practice, and in the practice sessions, we'll do some timing to see how quickly they're learning and assimilating their actual proficiency on the system, and we'll be tracking that information and analyzing it, making decisions around when people need to go back through specific parts of training, and or if we can move on because they're getting quick at what they're learning. So we have a very, very robust plan around that proficiency, those proficiency labs at this point. I mentioned earlier that we have a knowledge base, so we have completely migrated all of what we've called our priority 1 topics, and those are the topics that were related to CCNB training, the items that we needed to have ready for training. All of the information out of our current knowledge base has been converted, and along the way, we were measuring where we stood on a weekly basis, how many items were still left to be converted, what the status of them was, and in addition, we were tracking our progress of our course development. Those courses are complete. We started Train the Trainer yesterday, and now we'll be moving forward measuring how we're getting through the next phase of that knowledge base migration. Excuse me. For adoption, we'll be looking at proficiency comparisons, obviously. As we start into these proficiency labs, we'll be measuring, as I mentioned, how quick people are at the clicks. We're also going to be doing some additional assessment of how well they can handle a call with the new system processes. So our proficiency comparisons will start in those labs, and then clearly when we go live, we'll be looking at what their results were prior to go live and monitoring how quickly we get back to that same level of proficiency and productivity. We'll also be tracking error rates, customer feedback, and clearly continue to do some post-go live assessments. So along the way, we've done a lot of things that we have measured and are continually adding measurements that we're tracking. We're going to be tracking the assessments from the training classes, how well people are enjoying the class or what struggles they're having with the class. On a weekly basis, we'll be reporting out what the results of those assessments are, in addition to reporting out the progress of the number of classes that are being attended, what kind of absenteeism rate we're having in the class so that we can monitor and make sure that we're not getting to the end of our training process and we have people that haven't actually been through the training.
So Denise, it looks like we have a couple of questions that have come in through the panel or from the participants. So one question is, how much training are you giving your various users? I don't know if you could spend a minute. I know that the various user groups within your organization attend different amounts of training. If you wanted to share a little bit of those details.
Sure, Sheila, that's a great question. Actually, our training hours span from as little as 12 hours to as high as 244 hours. Our billing associates will be getting the bulk of the training, and the training is spread out starting from October 3rd, going clear up until March 3rd. The proficiency labs are between those training sessions, and it depends upon what their role is in terms of how much proficiency lab practice that they get. So I noticed that the next question is how much time in the practice session. It really depends on their role. Some of the roles are getting up to 120 hours of lab, and some of the roles are getting about 70 hours of lab. The folks that are the lower users, some of our transmission and distribution employees, they will not be going through proficiency because their training will happen right up closer to go live time, and they don't have the volume of work on CCNB that our call center, our customer offices, and our billing associates have.
Okay, that's great. Yeah, I know that you all are focusing very much on the proficiency and the practice time, making sure that the users not just feel comfortable in their knowledge, but feel comfortable with hands-on keyboards and really working through those transactions and doing some kind of real-time problem solving. One other question. Oh, it looks like we have another question coming through on gamification.
So, great question. The vendor that we are using for gamification is Ring-A-Rang. I'd be happy to provide any contact information you would want around that. We did go through an RFP, so we did look at more than one company when we made the decision to go with this pilot. And that's frankly one of the reasons that we chose Ring-A-Rang is because they were very open to doing a pilot first before we made a full decision.
And I know, Denise, that your gamification, you went through the pilot and got great feedback from your community.
We did. Our employees loved it. When the pilot stopped, they were screaming for games. Send it back again. And
so that's something that you're going to continue forward into the rest of your program.
We are. Clear up until go live.
Okay, that's great. One other question I have for you. You mentioned the pulse surveys. You know, communication sometimes and engagement are hard to gauge, right? You've been doing the pulse surveys and getting good feedback, good responses. What have you seen by way of trends in terms of participation from the pulse surveys? And then second to that is, what have your changes, what kinds of adjustments have you made in your communications or engagement activities based on the responses from those pulse surveys?
So we've seen an increase in both respondents, and we've also seen an increase across time of the 3 questions that we're monitoring, which are around them understanding what the project is, them having a commitment to the change, and them feeling confident that they'll get what they need to be successful. So we've seen great results in terms of that improving and the number of respondents also increasing. Our changes we've made have been somewhat minor because most of the feedback we've been getting has been largely positive. We have seen an area or two where they weren't getting adequate communication, and we've increased the communication level. We've seen some areas that didn't really have much knowledge about the project, but we also identified that they were a group that wasn't really a key stakeholder, and therefore they probably hadn't had much communication yet, so that group was on the next wave.
Right. Okay. And I know you've been sharing the results of those pulse surveys and other kind of feedback that you've received throughout the project with your Project Synergy leadership team as well as your key stakeholders and leadership team. What has the response been from them as you've shared those details with them in terms of their engagement with your stakeholders within your organization?
That's been good. I think it helps them see a little bit around roles they can help to play in terms of helping with communication. But you're right, we have been sharing that information across the board.
Okay, great. Anything else, Denise, kind of to cover off from an adoption perspective as you get ready to go into the final leg here of your deployment and adoption activities?
Well, so I would say that from a measurement perspective, what we've been measuring along the way has got us to where we're at. Now that's behind us, and this is where the rubber really meets the road.
Yep.
So our measurement moving forward is what really counts, because how well can they actually do what we need them to do and keep the business alive. So our measurement moving forward is going to be even more vital, I think.
Yep, great. And I know you have a great team, and everybody is very much focused on the goal, the end in mind, right, as making your business successful. I was particularly struck by the Stacy Durstein comment from a few months ago where she was talking about business readiness in particular and how important it is for the business to be ready for the system. So I know you're all very committed to this transformation.
Yep.
So with that, I don't know that we have other questions in here. Peggy, I think we're going to hand it over to you to share a bit more about the Avista story and what you've measured from an organizational change management perspective as part of your program.
Great, thank you, Sheila. And like Sheila mentioned, I am delighted to be here and share our story with you. I do work up in Spokane, Washington at Avista Utilities, and as Denise said, I won't share all the details of that, but I will tell you that our jurisdiction is in 3 states, Washington, Idaho, and Oregon, so we do have 3 commissions that we deal with on a regular basis, so that adds wonderful complexity to our world, and we are electric and gas up here that we provide for our services. We also, about 4 years ago, started off on our journey, gosh, almost 5 years now, on a project that we named Project Compass, and it actually turned out to be a wonderful name for depicting our journey along the way to implement a new customer service system, which was Oracle CCMB, as well as a new enterprise asset management system, and we chose IBM Maximo for that particular system. So as you can see from this photo, we did it. We were excited we did it. It was February 1st last year, and for those of you who might be Super Bowl fans, yes, that was Super Bowl Sunday, and yes, our Seahawks lost. So we always like to share that, but we're still with them and hoping for this year. So along with completing our project, I am really proud to share that we were also selected last year as the winner for the Best CS Implementation at CS Week for utilities over $500 million. So we were $500 million gross revenue. So we were really proud and excited of that. It was a lot of work, but a lot of learnings along the way and a lot of things that we're building on for our future projects that I'll share. So I won't spend a lot of time on this, but I always like to include a little bit of levity. You need it when you're trying to get an organization engaged on such a large project as what we dealt with, and so I will let you view that as you maybe want to come back and take a look at the presentation. When we look at our organization, we really focused on getting the organization ready. As Sheila and Denise spoke, you'll hear a lot of commonality between what Denise is doing and what we did. And we had some real learnings along the way, things that worked really, really well, and some things that we learned that we might want to do different for our future projects. So some of the key things I'll highlight here, we did a lot of surveys and feedback as part of our project. We focused on stakeholders and meeting with those stakeholders, and then a lot of focus around internal communications. So we kicked it off initially in building our awareness of where we were going with Project Compass and our employees by including them in our vendor demonstrations and asking them for feedback along the way and including that feedback in our vendor selection. We contacted our stakeholders, did a lot of surveys over phone and in person with them, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. And we also included external customer focus groups. So taking that information became vital for us as we built out those stakeholder meetings. We had over 200 plus presentations and roadshows that we did over the course of these several years. Everyone from our executive steering committee to directors to departments, customer service managers, we did lunch and learns, and then we did a lot of internal communications as well. As Denise did, we started doing postcards about, I think, 3 years ago, and they went out monthly to all of the management and leadership in our organization with the intent for them to share those and post them on the different SharePoint sites and in their team meetings and around their team work areas. So when we talk about our stakeholders, because we had chosen to do both, implement both a new customer service system and a new asset management system, as you can see from this slide, we had stakeholders that were impacted across the company. There's two different colors there. The top color is the more red color on this slide. That was our customer service stakeholders. And then down at the bottom, more orange, you can see more of our asset management. A key takeaway was that we had a lot of stakeholders such as financial outage management, our ET or IT organization, meter data management, et cetera, that were impacted by both system changes. So we really needed to accommodate that as we moved forward in our stakeholder assessments and making our plans to help them be successful as we went live with these new systems. As part of those stakeholder assessments, we started out by identifying those key stakeholder groups, and then we had very detailed surveys that we executed with them. We took those learnings and we created our training strategies, our communication strategies, and our organizational readiness plans, including a lot of that feedback that we got, and we checked in with them along the way to make sure that we were providing them the support that they needed, both in communication and in change throughout the project. We also really focused on engaging our employees on our project team, and we had a lot of different ways we did this, and we really tried to make it as fun as possible because these projects become long, as I'm sure all of you are aware. We had a traveling trophy that was awarded to individual team members. We had a passport that went with our Compass theme, and we stamped it with milestones along the way. We did certificates. We also had tokens that said, "You rock," and every team member could provide one of those tokens to another team member to say you really made a difference on this project, and then everyone got to throw those in at the end of every month, and they had a drawing for a small gift. It was $25. So I bring that up because it's just as important to keep your project team engaged as you go through the project as it is, of course, your customers and your stakeholders. So some of the areas that we focused on when we were looking at how are we going to really measure and make sure that we're keeping the organization informed, getting them ready for this change that we're about to embark on, we went through an effort and we identified change impacts, and just CCMB, we had over 220 key changes that were going to impact our customers and our employees, and we focused on what the scope of the change was, who was impacted, did it require training or just communication. We wove that in, and we really kept track of feedback as we went through all of our business communications with our different stakeholders. We tracked training and attendance, and I'll speak a little bit more to that and share some of those numbers in a moment. And we also tracked and incorporated all of those communications again. Our knowledge and proficiency checks for the readiness of our employees, we built into our training. So we had knowledge checks, we had classroom assessments, and all of that information we kept, we tracked, we analyzed as we went through the training so we could make sure that if we needed to make any adjustments in our delivery, that we were able to do that as we went. We also had scheduled sandbox time. I know there was a question on that earlier, and I'll speak to that in just a moment. And then we made sure that we were also getting feedback from anyone that was participating in the training, delivering testing, participating in testing, to make sure that we could incorporate all of that feedback as we went. When I mentioned we identified those change impacts, we had a business process improvement workshop early on in our project where we focused on identifying customer touch points. And as part of that, what we found was that not only were we going to have changes for our customers, such as along with a new system, they were getting a new bill, they were getting a new account number, we were changing our master billing processes. So there were changes all the way along on that right-hand side of the screen. We also identified a lot of the change impacts for our employees. So that was really critical for us as we went through and we talked about how do we want to make sure that this is successful for both the business and our customers, and identifying those customer employee impacts really allowed us to have a strong foundation for our communication strategy as we moved forward. So we tracked all those change impacts, wanted to make sure that as part of our metrics we were including what changes we're anticipating, what kind of impact they were going to have, the scope of the change, if we thought it was going to be a win or not, and then we made sure that we incorporated those changes back into our change and our training that we delivered. So from a training perspective, we wanted to make sure that, of course, we had everyone set up for success at the point of go live, and so some of our metrics that we found were interesting, I thought I would share. We had 100% attendance for our customer service training, which was unbelievable, but we also did have a slight incentive program because we wanted to make sure that people were engaged and that they got the learning that they needed. We had over 90%, I think it was about 94% for non-customer service from the business. From our end users, I think Denise had said that she had 240 hours anticipated training, and we had over 160 hours for those in customer service, and that included our back office and billing. And for non-customer service, for some of them it was up to 220. So we just have, those were the number of end users, I'm sorry. The total training hours were over 21,000 hours for customer service and over 2,000 for non-customer service. And it took us about a quarter to complete the training. We had started initially earlier in the summer, and we ended up having to have a little bit of stop and go with our projects, as some projects do. So we ended up building some amazing refresher training and restarted our training in the October timeframe for a go live the 1st of February. And as you can see on the right-hand side of the on the right-hand side of the slide, we had 3 introductory web-based training courses, and then you can see the other courses listed. And again, there were additional courses by those specialty groups. The question earlier about self-directed training, as we called it, we actually scripted some training for those that were doing sandbox training so that they would be able to have some exercises to do in the sandbox. And then we also gave them time, in addition to those 17 hours of scripted training, to go out and play in the sandbox and really be able to get their hands on. And then the review training we had to build in because we had a start-stop, so we had some additional training there. And then in addition to all of the classroom training and the web training, we had over 450 new step-by-steps that were documented as part of our knowledge base for our CSRs to have at their fingertips at any given time. So all of that process documentation was updated as well. So once we got everyone trained and they were ready to go, we had specific metrics around go live, and we had readiness criteria that we wanted to make sure that we met. So you can look through those and see that we had everything from making sure that our dress rehearsals were executed successfully. We had to have disaster scenarios documented for IT and business, including were the users really prepared and ready to go. Was everyone mapped, because they had to make sure that they got into the system successfully by role. So that's something that you don't think a lot about when you're really thinking about your projects, but it becomes really critical at go live that they can actually get into the system at the point of go live on that first day. So we had a suite of readiness metrics. We also had metrics around training and support. So we made sure, again, that we tracked that everybody complete their end-user training, the non-contact center or non-customer service folks as well as the customer service. Do we have our key support identified that's going to support this system once we go live? Have they been identified? Have they been trained? Are those positions filled? So just an example of the type of metrics that we had in place at that time. And then we had our adoption metrics, and we chose as a company to make sure that we really focused on our key performance indicators as how we were going to measure our performance both at go live and going forward. So we had our key performance indicators both by department and then for individual performance. For stabilization process, we wanted to make sure that we still focused on those same business metrics. So again, it was by department, individual, and we made sure that we integrated any of the changes that we needed to as far as process updates, any other changes to the system or to our business processes into our new hire training so that they got the latest training and it was continually evolving post-go live. And then we also put into place a governance team, so we made sure that we had continuous support for defect tracking any upgrades, prioritizing any of the upgrades or any of the issues that came up in new projects. So those metrics, we had to make sure all of those activities were in place at the point where we went live. And then as you can see, we had, again, our key performance indicators as our key metrics. Grade of service, average handle time, voice of the customer, and commission complaints. And again, metrics we were really proud of. Within 3 days of go live, we were pretty much up and running at the pre-go live levels, so we were really excited about that. And we didn't have any commission complaints related to our CC&B implementation, so that was exciting as well. So again, once we tried to do is just really focus our metrics on our ongoing business metrics, because that was really going to be what told our story of how successful our implementation was. And this is just another look at those metrics as well. And then individually, like I said, we continue to measure. We give individual feedback on how to the employees on how well they were doing, and they get that as part of their regular performance. And we just want to make sure that we're keeping it alive and keep measuring those KPIs. To date, you can see here just typical metrics for the customer service business. And what we found was in doing that, we post-go live, we continued to measure those KPIs. We still had upgrades and we still had updates to the system that we needed to put in post-go live, and those metrics, again, became key both from a business performance, but also along the way, we went back and looked at how we had communicated and how might we, again, use those lessons learned of what went really well for future projects, and what are the areas that we thought, you know what, we could probably do this better as we embark on these different platforms and programs that we're going to now. So, Sheila, I'll pass it back to you.
Yeah, so quick question there, Peggy. Given the fact that you are well past your go live, in terms of adoption and really the sustainability piece, can you share a little bit around the groups within your organization? You mentioned that the call center basically was kind of back up to their operational metrics or their target operational metrics within a few days. Can you talk a little bit about some of the other groups within your organization in terms of what their stabilization period looked like and or adoption rates? How are they doing? How are they feeling now? And how did that transition take place for the various groups?
Sure, of course. So for customer service, as you saw, they had a really strong engagement, and it was really successful, and they were able to get back up and running. For most of the areas, back to our stakeholder sheet where we had finance and we had some of those ancillary areas, it went really well as well. The biggest challenge that we had was more on the asset management side, where we had the operations folks. And a lot of the challenge there was just because of the nature of their work. Some of them got trained quite early compared to go live, and they didn't have time to go back and do some refresher training before go live. So for some of them, the go live experience was a little more challenging because we had to set up a lot more support at that go live point. And now that's Maximo is our new system on the work and asset management side, and now that system's going well. We still have challenges like anybody does, I think, when you put in a new system, especially because at Avista now We have so many integrations between all of these systems. When we implemented CC&B and Maximo, there were over 100 integrations that we had to make sure as we took apart all these systems and put them back together that they worked successfully. So I would say most of the organizations went well. I think there was a little bit of opportunity on the operations side for them as they looked back at it now to maybe do a little bit more, I think, in reflection on how they could have gotten engaged a little bit more. And it's funny because now some of those key stakeholders that were in leadership positions for the Maximo implementation are now key stakeholders for another program implementation as we're putting in some other new systems. And boy, they are right at the table. So it was a really good learning for them. And they said, you know what, we got it. What do we need to do? What can we do? And working with you to make sure that we really have this nailed. So.
Okay. Great, thank you. A question did come in from one of the participants related to this. It says, how are you handling users who just don't get the new change and can't perform? What do you do with them if they have poor performance after go live? So I'll ask a little bit retroactively, Peggy, in terms of how you all made some adjustments around performance if you identified those individuals. And Denise, kind of the go-forward plan for you all in terms of addressing these things. And I have a feeling there's probably some commonality in your responses. So Peggy, do you want to take that first?
Sure. So part of what we did, we started that process way back when we started training. And the trainers who were delivering the training, we worked closely with the managers of the different departments as we were delivering training. And if there were any individuals that were struggling for whatever reason and having a little trouble grasping the new process or the new concepts that we were introducing, we actually identified those folks, worked with our managers. We were able to give them some, I would call, remedial training or some extra training and some extra sandbox time so they could get their hands in there. We did have some people that, as you know, anytime you go through this much change, that were ready for retirement, and they said, you know what, this is great that you guys are doing this. Let me know how that works for you because I'll be retired. And that's okay because people need to make life choices. So we did have some people that retired. It is interesting because you have the unlearning of the old system, and we had a lot of new hires, especially in our customer service area, and they didn't have to unlearn the system as much as just learn the new one. And for them, boy, a lot of those new employees just picked it up really quick. So yeah. It was kind of, you know, you get that different dynamic in it.
Great. Denise, any commentary?
So yes, we actually have a very similar plan. When they go through a course, they take an assessment at the end. If they don't pass it, then they get a couple more chances to take the assessment just in case it was a fluke, they were having a bad day, whatever. And when they get to a certain point, I think we've settled on 3 times, 3 strikes are out kind of thing. And that just means that then they would go to discretion, they would be circled back into the training. They'd go to what we're calling discretionary labs, which are additional lab times for the proficiency and measuring that. In addition to them taking the assessments, we also have the trainers doing some what we call progress reports, and the trainers are really evaluating how well a group is doing. And we're looking for the outliers. We're not going to have them spend a lot of time on everybody who's meeting expectations. The people that are excelling, we're going to have them note those so that we can utilize those people. And we're going to note the people that are struggling. Maybe we've got some people that actually pass the test, but they have behavioral issues in the training, or perhaps they're passing it, but when they get to the practical hands-on part, they're struggling. Or maybe just the opposite. Maybe they are not passing the test at the 80% rate, but when they get their hands-on, they can do it. We can see that we're not sure why they're not passing that test because they can actually do it. So that's why we're doing the additional progress reports, and we'll be monitoring and tracking that to work with their leadership again in terms of making decisions, what do we need to do next.
Yes.
And like Peggy, we've already had some that have risen their hands and said, okay, I'm out in December. I again appreciate what you're doing, but I'm not going to stick around and participate. And we think we'll get some more of that. Not a lot. And I noticed there's another question up there about upstaffing, and yes, I'm sure Peggy did. We are upstaffing our call center to account for the change.
Yes, I was going to say we did. We ended up we have 160 people in customer service, as I mentioned earlier on that slide, and about 100 and I think 20 of those, I want to say, are probably customer service reps. And we ended up having several new hire sessions of 15 people each. I think there was 3 of them at least during that time period. So we had quite a few people, and remember our project was over 4 years. So we had people that we hired all the way throughout the project. We also had a brand new set that we added at the end of employees, and we ended up with pretty much the same amount of employees when all was said and done because of attrition and turnover, but we did end up adding a few back in our back office to supplement additional work there. The other thing I was going to offer, Sheila, in relationship to your previous question, is that once we went live, starting the day of go live, we had our, folks that were on the floor supporting all of the end users, and they would meet twice a day during that go-live period, I think for three or 4 weeks, and they captured the things that the CSRs were struggling with, and we were able to get them either immediate answers to everybody real time, or they included those in training sessions, and they added training sessions over the course of the weeks that came after go-live, just to make sure that they had the support that they needed.
Yeah, Peggy, that's great, and Denise as well. What I think is fabulous about both of your programs is you're measuring knowledge and and proficiency, right, through assessments and observation. And you're using that information to give people individual attention to make sure that they have the support that they need, both pre and post go live, to be able to do their job successfully. I think you all have the right things in mind, both in terms of, Peggy, what you've done, and Denise, what is on the plan and on the radar for you. Talking a little bit about training hours, Peggy, you mentioned the number of total training hours that your audiences, that your end users went through. Denise, I was wondering if you might take a moment to share kind of the forecasted training hours for the number of users that you have as part of the APS organization.
Yes, for CCNB we have 91,754 training hours for CCNB. Add another 3,520 hours for mobile workforce management training, and that's a huge amount. We have, starting in October up through January, we'll have 121 full-time equivalents off the job every day in training. That bumps up to 211 full-time equivalents off the job in a day for training from January to February.
Yeah.
So significant hours impact to the business. A lot of people in training.
A lot of people, a lot of man hours, right? It goes to show the focus really on the anticipated success of these programs. There is a question here that asks about what was the staffing for your change management efforts. Peggy and Denise, I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about some of your change management teams, your structure, how many people you brought onto your team, whether it was on a full-time basis or a part-time basis, to really help manage the change as you went along through as you go along through the program. Peggy, do you want to take that first?
Sure. So when I first started, I was hired for this program, and I was a team of 1. And I remained a team of 1 within the project, but what I had was we had our change agent network that we built both formally and informally. On the customer service side, we ended up meeting first once a month, then every other week, then every week with our key change agents and our key managers from customer service. So there was a strong direct connection with them that was ongoing with our project team. The other thing that we had was all of our project team that was internal from Avista was full-time dedicated to the project. So we took several people out of our customer service and those support organizations that became part of the project team. So they worked closely back with the business, and they were empowered to make decisions on behalf of the business because that's where they came from and they had that expertise. So from a change agent perspective, they were involved and they were able to help drive a lot of those changes. On the operations side, we had a similar operation connection with our stakeholders there, but it wasn't quite as robust. And so we had pulled probably, I want to say 20 people from the business on the operations side that were involved in training. And Denise has a large organization, but those 91,000 hours, we had 25,000 hours, and it takes a lot of time from those folks. So we engaged them early on, so they became part of the communications and part of that change agent role prior to them actually delivering training. And then post-go live, those folks went back to the business and they became our subject matter experts, and they continue to be our change agents to help support the change to the new system.
Okay, that's great. Denise?
And so I started out alone initially, and I am full-time on the project. I have a change management lead that is really working through the action planning with the business in terms of the process mapping for those changes. I have 3 leaders that report to me, a training delivery leader, training development leader, and a training scheduling and logistics leader. And then we have 17 trainers that started Train the Trainer this week. We'll be adding a few more backups over the next few weeks, so getting us up to about 24, I think. And in addition, we have our system integrator support that has been with us through the process.
Yeah. Overall, you have a very large change team that's dedicated to this. Would you say about 20, 25 people?
We do. And then in addition to that, we have our change champions. We have 25 within the customer service organization and about 25 within the transmission and distribution organization, and we meet with them monthly, really just to help us communicate and give us feedback. As we get closer, we'll probably be employing them to do some additional things for us.
Yep. So that's actually a nice segue. There was another question that came in from the participants around roadshows and demos. If you can talk a little bit more about the roadshows and the demos that you've done throughout the project. How many sessions do you think you've conducted? How many people do you think you've touched along the way? I know that that's been an ongoing effort for Denise, for you, and Peggy certainly was for you throughout your project. So Denise, you want to take that one first?
So road shows we are doing quarterly. The first quarter I did about 15 of them. The second quarter I did about 22 of them, and this past quarter I did 42 of them. Each time we're adding more people. In some cases the lower number was because we did larger groups together. They were having all hands meetings. But we typically are talking to 600 plus employees each quarter on the road shows.
Okay.
And now that we've started training, that will decrease a little bit because all of the customer service organization that will be in the middle of training will not get a road show. Probably do one more round of road shows for the transmission and delivery folks that aren't going to start training until January, because we have some processes that we want to kind of present to them and make sure they're anticipating it and aware of it.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. And Peggy, I don't know if you want to share a little bit more about your road shows and demos.
Sure. Yeah, we did, like I said, we did well over 200 presentations. For our customer service groups, we did probably 3 rounds of formal road shows and probably about the same for operations as well. And again, the first part of it from a change management perspective was building that awareness and hopefully building a little bit of that desire to change. When we were able to get far enough along in our project to be able to actually demo the system, that's when they really hit home. And we did road shows for everyone that was impacted in our business, which was well over 1,000 employees. And we also, like Denise said, sometimes we combine those. The road shows that we did that really were meaningful were where we could take members of our project team who came from that team, for example, someone from billing, include them in that road show because they could speak the language, and the team members could share their perspective from a project team, but also the employees could look at it and say, oh, okay, here, if Sue can do this, I can do this. And so it went a long way from a change management perspective.
Yeah,
and one real quick thing we also did on those road shows is we made sure that they went up and down and across. So any of the information that we shared with the teams, we made sure that went up so that the management and the leadership could also support that messaging.
Okay. Thank you, Peggy. We have one last question that we'll take here, is really around train the trainer in terms of who is identified for train the trainer positions, because I know resourcing with these large projects becomes an issue in terms of how many people you're pulling from the business and such. So Denise, I know Train the Trainer started this week for you all. Peggy, yours was a while ago, but how did you identify the individuals that you incorporated into your Train the Trainer and training delivery program?
Do you want me to take it first? So, Denise, go ahead.
We had brought in some training developers early on because we were making that migration from our knowledge base, and we were working on beginning the course workbook development. Those training developers, we had 10 of them. We have taken 7 of them that we are converting into trainers, and they are actually participating in the Train the Trainer. We also solicited for some additional trainers in the business, and we were only able to come up with about 5 more. So we have supplemented with our system integrator, as you know, which is EY. And in addition to that, So that's where we got our Train the Trainers from. We got most of them, we got a large group from the business that were developers. We brought in a few more that are coming in just to deliver, and then we've supplemented with our system integrator staff.
Perfect, thank you. Peggy?
Yeah, it was a similar approach. We, on the CCMB side, we used our developers as trainers and supplemented some from the business, especially from billing and back office. On the operations side, we also contracted for both CCMB and for Maximo. We contracted with a third-party training developer with the Mosaic company, and they helped us on the training. They didn't deliver, but they were in the room for part of the delivery, especially on the Maximo side. And we also put out an all points bulletin for some trainers. And we did pull in about 15 trainers, I would say, 17 trainers from the business, especially for operations and for the non-customer service training. We did go through a selection process a little bit. We had criteria because we wanted them to be successful, so we didn't want to just pull anyone into training that really might not have a true, the true right desire or the skill set. And then we provided the Train the Trainer training for them, not just on the content, but how to train. So we had a several days training for them as well.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So obviously, I thank you both for taking the time to put the content together and certainly share your stories. There's certainly a lot of activity that happens as part of organizational change management. And as you've all heard today, there are a lot of things that you can measure and track along the way and certainly make adjustments to your program. Use that information that people are sharing with you to make adjustments to your program and helping people on a truly an individual by individual basis through this change. So I think that's it's important. I think that both Peggy and Denise have done fantastic work as part of their change programs. And with that, Lisa, I believe we turn it over to you for some wrap-up.
Well, great. Thank you, Sheila. That was just a spectacular webinar. Thank you, ladies, for sharing with us. Just wanted to follow up quickly just to remind everyone that the webinar recording will be available later this afternoon. We wanted to thank Denise, Peggy, and Sheila for participating. And with that, I think we'll close this afternoon. Thank you.